Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. In this lecture, I wanted to discuss Surah Adiyat. This is a very early Makki surah. And what you'll see is that it's really stressing upon the fact that insan is incredibly ungrateful. And now it actually fits in very well with what we were discussing in the previous lecture, because in that case, Allah was talking about the coming of the final hour. That final earthquake which will be so devastating and in which insan will be so confused about the situation of the earth, and that is the time when the entire earth will split open and all of the people in the grave will be able to come out. The day of judgment will commence, and we know that even the earth will bear witness to the deeds, the actions, the behaviors, the things that were done by insan, whether they were good or whether they were bad. So therefore, in this context, this surah is actually a further continuation of that, where Allah is reminding insan that as this Quran is about to end, you need to really examine yourself and see what will be your situation on that day. Will you be, or do you have any chance of being amongst those who will receive their record on the right hand and therefore be able to get into Jannah? Or are you someone who can look back at his life and realize, I've never really done anything. I've never done any good deeds. I've not dedicated any time to Islam or to Allah. I might be amongst those who will receive their record in the left hand, which means I better start doing something at least. If I'm able to change myself now, I might just have the hope of receiving Allah's mercy. But if I have done nothing, if all these years I've only been chasing dunya, then I cannot possibly even have the hope that Allah's mercy will shine upon me, because I haven't really prepared for the akhirah. So in that sense, this surah is really a beautiful continuation of that. And what you see is that in the beginning, Allah is taking an oath now. And Allah is swearing by the racers, panting, and those that produce sparks when striking, and the chargers at dawn, stirring up the clouds of dust, arriving thereby in the absolute center. So what you can see is Allah is taking an oath by something over here. He's not specifically mentioning what this creature is, but he's describing it. So he's telling us that what is characteristic about this creature is that it races, it pants, and every time its feet strike the ground, there are sparks that you can see. It is known for charging at dawn, stirring up clouds of dust, and it charges right towards the center. Now, of course, when you start to understand all of these things, then as mentioned by the scholars, it seems as if Allah is talking about horses. And this seems very likely because not only are these characteristic features present in horses, but we know that 1400 years ago in the Arab desert, horses were known for doing these kinds of things. Camels were not known for being racers, for panting, for having all of these sparks that emit every time their hooves strike the ground. This was characteristic of horses. Okay, so clearly Allah is talking about the animal, which is the horse. And then after making these oaths and describing this specific thing about the horse, Allah says, indeed man to his Lord is ungrateful, and indeed he is to that a witness, and indeed he is in love of wealth intense. So as I've mentioned many times before, there has to be a link between the oaths that are being taken and the statement that is coming. So if Allah is talking about the horse, and then the statement that he gives is that indeed man is ungrateful, that must mean that the specific characteristic feature that he's talking about the horse must have something to do with gratefulness. Now, in this regard, when you study about horses, of course, horses are known for their speed. They're known for their incredible muscular strength. And that's why you can see Allah talking about them racing and panting and all these sparks that are being emitted, and them charging and, always arriving there in the center and stirring up clouds of dust. So he's focusing on their speed, on their agility, and on their incredible muscular strength. But something else that he is really focusing on is their loyalty. And so the fact that, a horse is so loyal to its rider that it will charge during the early hours of dawn. And what that actually means is that the Arabs at that time, if they had to launch an ambush on another tribe, they would often do it in the early hours of dawn, because that's when the enemy is sleeping and the enemy is not expecting anything. And the beautiful thing about the horse is that when it is commanded by its rider to charge or to ambush into an enemy tribe, The horse doesn't do any calculation. It doesn't fear the fact that if I go into this tribe, then there's a very high chance that I might eventually be killed. It doesn't think about the future. It has no fear of what's coming up ahead. It just does exactly what its rider tells it to do. And so if the rider tells it to charge at the early hours of dawn and to go right in the center of the enemy tribe, that's exactly what the horse will do. And this is what Allah is mentioning here, that it stirs up clouds of dust, charges at dawn, and it arrives right in the center. So it goes right in the center of the entire battle, and it has no fear of the consequences. This is why the horse is not just known for its agility and for being very muscular, but more than that, it is also known for being fearless, for being very, very loyal. In fact, the Arabs at that time would also consider that during battle, the best companion of an individual is his horse. And this is something that, of course, we know even today. Horses are known for being loyal to their rider, and they're known for being excellent companions. So after talking about all of this, when Allah says, well, indeed mankind to his Lord is ungrateful, then it becomes very easy to understand what exactly Allah is saying. That when it comes to the horse, which is an animal, it is so incredibly loyal to its rider. But in contrast, insan, who is so much more smarter than a horse, who has so much more akal, this intellect, amazing resources that Allah has granted it, so much more than the kind of things granted to a horse. Yet insan is so ungrateful to its master. So in other words, while the horse is so loyal to its master, even though the master is asking it to charge to right in the center of the enemy tribe, the master wants the horse to go in the most dangerous area. And yet the horse is so loyal. While in contrast, insan has a creator who loves it so much. A creator who is not even asking that much from insan. Allah does not ask every insan to just charge into the battlefield and to just give up their lives and give up everything. In fact, what Allah demands in terms of haququllah and haququl ibad is actually the bare minimum. These are things that are not very, very difficult for us to do. Yet despite these minimum requirements that the Creator has upon his slave, the slave still is ungrateful, and the slave still is disloyal. The slave still has the audacity to say, no Allah, I refuse to do this because I would rather chase my dreams and my life and this dunya. And the surprising thing is that even though Allah has made so many promises to us, telling us that if you were to make even the smallest sacrifice for me, I will repay you. I will give you so much of my blessings. I will give you contentment and peace and wisdom and barakah, so much more. Not just in this dunya, but also in the akhirah. So don't be afraid. Don't be terrified of doing jihad. Allah makes so many promises, yet despite knowing all of that, despite seeing that Allah has in fact been there for us since the very beginning, we get so terrified and scared, we don't want to walk on the path of Islam unless the path of Islam becomes easy. As soon as it becomes slightly difficult, we walk in the opposite direction. And furthermore, this comparison, in fact, with the horse is so beautiful because when you look at a horse as well, its master does not give it that much at all. Except for the bare minimum, food and water and so on, that's it. Yet even though the master is giving such minimal basic things that are actually given to any other animal, the horse shows so much loyalty. And in contrast, when it comes to insan has been given so much more in terms of health, wealth, children, in terms of resources, basic everyday daily sustenance, rizq, aql, wisdom, intellect, so many things that in fact Allah tells us in the Quran that even if you were to start listing the things, you would never be able to list all of them. It's impossible. There are just so many blessings that Allah has given us, and Allah says, despite giving you so much, still we have the audacity to say, no Allah, we cannot show that basic level of loyalty to God. Still we at times like to become friends with the shaitan instead of becoming friends to Allah. So this is a beautiful comparison where Allah is making, and you can link this now to Surah Teen as well. In Surah Teen, Allah says that despite being made in the best possible mold and the best possible design, in other words, being made as Ashraf al-Makhluk, soon we return them to the lowest of the low. This is something that was mentioned specifically in Surah Teen. And what that means is that despite insan being the best of all of Allah's creations, it actually lowers itself, it debases itself to the extent that it becomes lower than the lowest. In other words, it becomes lower than animals. And the reason why scholars often make this comparison with animals is because animals do not have the kind of aql, the kind of intellect that Allah has bestowed upon insan. Our ability to deduce, to infer, to reason, it is so intellectually strong that animals, even if they might be able to do a bare minimum, it's nothing compared to what we are capable of doing. At the same time, the fact that we can express empathy, we can enforce justice, we have this concept of being able to show compassion and mercy. These are very high qualities that an animal cannot possibly show, because an animal does not have any understanding of these things. An animal cannot enforce justice. An animal cannot show compassion and mercy. If an animal is hungry, it will eat. It's as simple as that. An animal does not know the concept of forgiveness. Okay, so what Allah is explaining is that insan, despite being made in the best possible mold with the best possible qualities and the best design, he chooses to reduce himself so low that he becomes worse than an animal. And now that same thing mentioned in Surah Teen, you can link it now over here to Surah Adiyat, where Allah is saying that even the horse shows more loyalty than insan. Even the horse, despite being given the bare minimum, always pays heed to the instructions that it is given by its master, and it will do exactly what its master wants. And insan, despite having so much more than the horse, so many more resources and qualities, insan blatantly refuses the commands of Allah. It refuses to follow all of Allah's instructions, therefore becoming so disloyal that he actually reduces himself to the lowest of the low. He becomes worse than the horse, worse than the animal. And again, now Allah is explaining this in detail. He says, indeed, he is to that a witness. So insan, when insan shows disloyalty to Allah, Allah is making it clear that even he is a witness to that. So each and every one of us, when we are going against Allah's command, we know in our hearts that exactly what we're doing is wrong. It's not like we're completely oblivious. It's not like we have no idea that Allah has given us a command and we are choosing to go against it. Because as Allah has explained in Surah Shams, He has proportioned our soul in such a beautiful way, in such a perfect manner, that even within our nafs, we have a nafs-e-lawama, which is the good part of our nafs that gives us guilt. So the fact that we have this alarm system inside of us is a guarantee that every time we are doing something wrong, we know it in our hearts. And that's why Allah says that we are going to testify even against ourselves, because we know it. You know, for example, if you see somebody who's praying and you choose not to pray because you're too lazy, or because you feel that your friends might make fun of you, the more you see the other person pray, you have that feeling in your heart, that pinch in your heart, which tells you at that moment that what you're doing is wrong. In the same way, if you see somebody who is wearing hijab and you choose not to, at that moment, you know exactly what is going on in your heart, that pinch that you feel, because even if it's for a fraction of a second, that pinch that you are feeling is testifying that you are doing something which is wrong, that there is a command of Allah this other person is adhering to, and you should be too, but you are choosing to ignore it. Okay, and as soon as we feel that pinch, then it becomes up to us if we want to pay heed to that guilt that we're feeling and do something about it, or if we want to just push it back and just completely ignore it by distracting ourselves. And this is why Allah is saying that indeed man is ungrateful, but also indeed for certain he is to that a witness. None of us can stand in front of Allah and say, Allah, I did not know, because Allah has guaranteed that we have been designed in such a way that we have a guilt system inside of us, and that nafs-e-lawama will inform us that we are wrong. And furthermore, Allah then He gives us another guarantee. He says, indeed, He is in love of wealth intense. So now He's answering the question that why is insan so ungrateful? When Allah tells us to do something, why do we at times say no? Or, why do we come up with all kinds of lame excuses at that moment? Because we're chasing dunya. And because the path of Islam is completely opposite to the path of dunya. Islam demands sacrifices. Islam demands jihad. It expects us to give less time to dunya and more time to the Quran. It expects us to go out and help other people. It expects us to show empathy and be caring and kind and generous and always sharing, the kind of resources that Allah has given us. And when you chase dunya, dunya expects the complete opposite. In fact, if you're a student of economics, the very first thing that you are told is that you must maximize satisfaction. And if you are somebody who is not maximizing your personal satisfaction, then you are someone who is not doing that which is rational. So you are basically classified as being an irrational human being. A rational, smart, intellectual human being, sensible human being, is somebody who is always trying to maximize their personal, private satisfaction. That is the first lesson that we are taught in economics. The first thing that we are taught in business is you have to maximize profit. That's what the entire game is. You have to convert everything into money and you must maximize your profit. In fact, nowadays, we actually measure each other's worth based on the amount of assets that we have. And you will see this, that, if you want to find out about somebody on Google and you type that person's name, one of the things that is explained is what is the person's net worth. And his net worth is basically in a certain number of dollars, which explains the amount of assets this person has, and that determines how valuable this individual is. So the more his net worth is, the more followers he has, the more valuable he is as a human being. Right? So we live in this kind of a world where everything equates to the amount of money you have or the amount of wealth you have, which is precisely what business and economics has taught us. And what Allah is saying is, this is the reason man becomes disloyal, because he forgets that I didn't give you a brain and I didn't give you resources so that you could chase dunya, maximize your net worth, maximize your followers. That's not the reason you were given everything. You were given all of these things to chase Allah. You were given all of these things to use them in order to be successful in your test, in order to pass this test. That's why Allah has given us qualities and traits and resources and, even a family. Everything that He has given us in this world is so that it can be used somehow to help us pass this exam. And we're using it in the exact opposite direction. Just as an example, it's as if there's a parent who has spent 25 years doing everything possible to raise his child in the correct way, grooming him, training him, teaching him all kinds of things, and saving as much money as he possibly can so that his child can have a brilliant education. And then after that, he's able to have he can have a stable career and so on. And imagine when the parent finally takes all the money that he saved and hands it over to the child and says, okay, now I want you to go and pursue your education and become something great in this world. And the child ends up losing all the money, or he ends up using it all on gambling and casinos and shopping and so on. The devastation that a parent feels at that time is so intense that I spent all these years doing so much for you so that you could have a better life, and you ended up throwing it all away. You wasted all the resources in the complete opposite direction. And you can imagine, you and me, if we are in that situation, our parents will give us this long lecture that this isn't the reason that I gave you so much money. This isn't the reason that I groomed you and trained you and spent so much time teaching you about morals and values and ethics. It wasn't so that you could waste yourself away through gambling and through all kinds of entertainment. And that is precisely what Allah is telling us here, that every single thing we have is an amanat. Everything that Allah has blessed upon us is something we will be answerable for. It was not given to us to simply enjoy. It was not given to us as a gift. It was not given to us that Allah is saying, take it, enjoy it, and I will not question you about it. Everything you and me have is an amanat. The house, the clothes, the shoes, the car, houses, money, intellect, tangible or intangible. Everything is an amanat. And everything has been given to us for only one purpose. Use it in order to pass this exam of life, so that you can be successful in the akhirah. And the more we use it to chase dunya, in order to maximize our personal satisfaction, in order to maximize our profit, the more Allah is going to ask us on that final day, where did you use all of the things that I gave you? And in fact, I've mentioned this in my other lectures as well many, many times, that according to the hadith, Allah mentions that when it comes to the children of Adam alayhi salam, every single one of us will have to answer 5 very important questions before we even have a chance to maybe make it into Jannah. Allah will ask us, how did we spend our lives? Allah will ask us in specific, how did we spend our youth when we were young? We had time, we had energy, we had health. Allah will ask us, how did we earn our money? He will ask us, where did we spend our money? And He will ask us, what did we do with the knowledge that we had acquired? So just from these 5 questions, you can understand that everything you have is an amanat. You will be asked about it. And this is what Surah Adiyat is trying to stress upon, that we should not be amongst those who are so ungrateful and disloyal that we are humiliated on that day, because we end up realizing that Allah is now demanding answers. He wants to know where we have used all of the resources and the blessings that He had given us, and we absolutely have no answer. Because the truth is, we were intensely in love with this dunya. That's all that we cared about. And that's why Allah says, but does He not know that when the contents of the graves are scattered, and that within the chest is obtained, indeed their Lord with them that day is going to be fully acquainted. So does insan not know that he cannot even hide in the grave, even when he has died and he is down, deep down, buried in the soil? He can still not hide from Allah. He can still not escape the coming of that final day. He will be taken out of that soil. He will be raised up again, and he will be then held accountable for every single thing that he did. There is no escape. And at that point, Allah is saying that everything that was within the chest is going to be obtained. Now, what is within the chest? The qalb, the heart. So the heart that is responsible for making all of the decisions, that heart is going to be asked, what kind of decisions did you make in this dunya, and why did you make it? The heart that silently testifies when it knows that there is a command of Allah which it is choosing to ignore, that heart will have to testify on the Day of Judgment. And there is just no place where the heart can hide. And that is why Allah is saying every secret that you have, everything is going to be unveiled on that day. It doesn't matter how deep down in the soil you are buried, Allah will be able to get you out. And indeed, their Lord with them that day is going to be fully acquainted. There is nothing that you can do which Allah is oblivious of. There is nothing that Allah is unaware of. There is no secret that you have in your heart that Allah doesn't know about. This is what Allah is reminding us in this beautiful surah, that we cannot hide behind this screen of depression, grief, anxiety, fear. We cannot do that. Because at the end of the day, Allah will ask us, well, why were you depressed? And when we say, Allah, we were depressed because this person hurt me, or because my life was so difficult, or because, my childhood was so miserable, and so on and so forth, there are so many people out there in the world who have a lifestyle 1,000,000 times worse than us. So many people who are born in war-torn regions of the world, who have nothing. They were born in a family with nothing, and for years they have nothing. And yet they are still struggling, yet they are still surviving, yet they are still doing whatever they can in the cause of Islam. Yet they are still positive and so grateful to Allah. What excuse can me and you have on that day to explain why we spent our life in negativity, hopelessness, despair, depression, always just procrastinating, unable to get up and do anything for Islam because we're just feeling so down? We don't have that excuse. In the same way, when we complain and say, Allah, we had so much fear of the future. We had so much uncertainty that fear was it paralyzed us. It was so hard for us to do anything. How can we say that when there is a significant portion of the world's population in these terrible poverty-stricken areas, and they should have immense fear of the future because they don't even know if they will have enough to eat tomorrow to survive? Yet, as Muslims, they are still grateful. They are still in love with Allah. They are still filled with positivity, this love for jihad. They are still grateful for every single tiny thing that Allah has given them. And yet, people like you and me who have been given so much, we still are complaining that Allah, you've actually given us nothing. And our life is miserable. And we have so much fear of failing in the future. Right? This is what we all have to understand before the time is up, before we hit the grave and the doors of Tawbah are closed. We need to understand that we have been created as Ashraf al-Makhluk. We have been created as Allah's best creation. We should not debase ourselves and make ourselves the lowest of the low. We need to fight this depression, this anxiety, this grief, and this fear today. Instead of just delaying this and saying, yes, this is something that I must do and I will do it, inshallah, maybe a couple of days later, a couple of weeks later. This is the time me and you need to change, because it's the time of Ramadan. It's the time when all the shaitans are chained up. It's a time when, the only battle that we face is between the ruh and the nafs. There is no waswase of shaitan at this moment. So if we still do not make a positive change and we don't turn our lives around, once Ramadan is over and the shaitans are out and they are free to give us waswase again, we will be in that terrible state one more time. And then we will spend the entire next year doing the same miserable things again, feeling bad, down, and depressed. And then next year, when Ramadan starts again, we'll just be thinking that, okay, I just wasted another year. I promised that I would do certain things, but I ended up doing nothing. May Allah grant us all ease. May Allah give us the ability to fill our hearts with positivity, to be able to struggle in the cause of Islam, to be able to absorb the nur and the words of the Quran. And may Allah grant us all salvation. Assalamu alaikum.